pop up and say, if you give us enough money, you get 5 stars. Uh, we actually do know how to deal with that. Because, like you said, looking at it from the financial aspect, and I'm drawing a blank as to whether it's the SEC or the FTC. It must be the SEC because it's run as the banking regulator.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talks Series brought to you by AKFI, the Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. And my name is Isabella. I'm the co-host here with my another co-host, Manuel, and our today's guest, Eric Berger. Thank you so much for being here. It's so great to have you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. This talk brings together great minds to discuss the current state and the future state of ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. I'm delighted to have our guest here, Eric Berger. Eric has a impressive background. Let me give a quick intro just for our audience to be aware. Eric is the Virginia Tech Research Professor of NextG Security and Research Director of the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. And Professor Berger's background includes public service at the Federal Communication Commission and the White House, as well as executive positions in nonprofit and private organizations. Some of his appointments include Research Professor of Computer Science at Georgetown University, CTO and Senior Advisor at FCC, Assistant Director at the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy, Board Member and Executive Board positions at the Public Interest Registry and numerous other companies. And Eric, you hold a PhD in Computer Science from the Illinois Institute of Technology. Wow, thank you. Thank you for being here. It's such a exciting moment to hear all the informations and insights from you.
It's very much a pleasure to be here. Yes.
And of course, I would like to congratulate Eric for his achievement at FCC and in his governmental career, because he spearheaded the 988. This is a number for the National Suicide Prevention Line. And I want to connect it with the theme of today, because when we think of stakeholders in ESG and we think of stakeholders in sustainability, there are few greater achievements than a national service to everybody in the US, and hopefully that will evolve and go and roll in other places in the world, as happened with 911 and other services. So again, heartfelt congratulations for the achievement and the launch.
Yeah, thank you. It was unexpected. Of the many things that I was involved in at the FCC, that one just came up. And it's probably the thing I'm the most proud of all the achievements at the FCC, because it's one of these things that affects so many people, and it's my little pitch for people doing government service. Other than an emergency room doctor, there are not that many jobs where you can say, I did this, and 1,200 people a year will have better outcomes or survive. And that's my pitch for people to consider some public service.
Absolutely. And again, thank you, Eric. I'll turn to you, Isabella, for maybe the first question.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, as a very humanitarian person myself, what you just said definitely touches my heart. That's a great initiative to benefit the society. To begin the question, we always start with something relatively broad as an overview of your thinking and perspectives on today's world. And to be specific, what are your thoughts on the current sustainability, ESG, and digital trends?
Yeah, absolutely. That's and like you said, it's a very broad question. And I look at the work that I've been doing recently in the NextG Alliance, and digital transformation really does affect more than IT. Many people think of it as like it's an IT thing. We're going to take our processes and automate them, or we're going to take our automated processes and we're going to move them to the cloud. Um, and here we are, 2 decades later, and it's still kind of a fresh thing to say, well, as we're looking to, change how we do our business processes, that's literally an opportunity to change the business processes. In the NextG Alliance, we're looking at sustainability, and it's really a two-pronged issue. One prong is how can we make communications more efficient? And you can think of that in the enterprise. How can we make our business processes more efficient? How can we address more customers? How can we satisfy them more? But it also enables new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. In the communications world, yes, we're going to reduce the carbon footprint and the energy consumption of a radio network, but we also might enable more sustainable agriculture, or more efficient smart cities, or more effective training, so that people don't need to get on airplanes and burn a lot of carbon to get from here to there to learn new things. So, we can see that in the enterprise as well, as there are more digital transformation projects. And in fact, I think the biggest one, I've been working with a government who's looking at totally revamping their, let's just say, service delivery infrastructure. And it is considered, a total digital transformation of the entire government in order to better serve their citizens.
I totally agree about the new way of thinking, new way of communicating. We're talking about a whole culture transformation instead of just on a technology front.
And that's true. We actually trying to educate everybody that digital transformation we prefer to call it transformation digital, because the transformation is the big factor, the change, as you mentioned, changing education and reskilling, and change of the culture of the people, which is part of sustainability of the stakeholders. Changing the business models, which affects the stakeholders and the shareholders of the company. And of course, the technology and the underlying technology that you've been working, I know for many years to progress it, right? So we met at the time that the light speeds were around 1 megabit per second. So very much agree. And this initiative of the NextGen Alliance, I think it's part of your job now at the university, right?
That's right. It's about a third of my time. I'm serving as the technical program director of the initiative. And, as we look at this digital transformation, as you said, Manuel, I mean, when we first met, people were still saying you could not possibly have real-time interactive voice. Forget video. I mean, video, that absolutely would never happen. We would never be able to do what we're doing right now.
Absolutely.
So we've got the existence proof. And we're looking to creating that new environment where networking really is like oxygen. It's just there. We're not talking about wires anymore. We're not talking about ridiculously expensive data plans. It's just ubiquitous and everywhere. And what are the things that would create? I think we'll all be disappointed if it only creates faster Facebook. that there are probably some new and innovative applications out there that I couldn't even begin to enumerate.
Fully agree. And as you said, anything speeding up above our physical possibility to observe, absorb, and understand, it's, projecting in an ESG kind of format, it's a waste of resources.
Yeah, one kind of ESG issue that I ran into a lot in government, and now I'm running into even more on the research side, is like communications is not the only thing that uses the electromagnetic spectrum. We use the magnetic spectrum for what we call radio location or radar. Very important. We just recently had issues where people were saying airplanes were going to fall out of the sky, and that turned out to be not the case. But there are other places of conflict where there could be interaction with the incumbent users of that spectrum. Certainly, we saw it play out in some of the remote sensing applications for like weather forecasting, and even maybe not electromagnetic, but just the fact that there are a lot of objects over the planet. When you're trying to do astronomy, there are now things there that weren't there, just a year ago or 5 years ago. And so I know right now we're working on a lot of ways of coexistence that the traditional way that at least the US government has done it is kind of binary. And it's binary at the worst case. If you have the worst case needs of the incumbent combined with the worst case interference from the new person, and then we look at that and say, oh, if the incumbent can still work, it's a yes. And if the incumbent doesn't work, it's a flat no. When it turns out that maybe, half a day a year, there would be interference. But for the other 364 days, you actually could very happily coexist, which starts to impact, these competing social needs. Like we definitely need the weather forecast. That's a huge social need. And we need commerce and all of the things that are enabled by making that spectrum available. And maybe if we think of things more through a dialogue and more through, we live in a dynamic world. So, can we look at systems that are more responsive to the environment than just, we'll just take the worst case.
But you're also bringing a very interesting point, because if we think of pollution, we think of carbon footprint, maybe methane, nitrogen, greenhouse gases in one word. But actually, there is electromagnetic pollution.
What kind of pollution?
Electromagnetic, right?
Oh, yes.
Because this is also part of the human activities, and it's also limited resource, right? Well, we can move to higher frequencies, but the physics don't let us perform at the same level at the high frequency.
That's right. I did, off the record and in a friendly way, had a discussion with a congressional staffer because their boss had put out this press release saying, we want our constituents to have really high-speed fiber because it's so much faster than copper and radio. And so I had to do the little physics education of, actually fiber is the slowest. It's like 40% slower than radio waves. But in the radio waves, you're competing with all the other noise that's around you. You don't get to use all the bandwidth. Whereas, with all the fiber, there's little to no interference between fibers that cross or bundle together and things like that. And so your effective throughput is faster.
I'll propose a separate roundtable. We'll bring a couple of our friends. I think that's a really, really important discussion. But moving, a little bit more into the finance and the challenges, the financial challenges, we find out that most executives today put sustainability, ESG, in the cost center. They think it's a cost of doing business. They look at it as a short-term cost, as opposed to look at the long-term effect on the environment and the consequences of not supporting the environment. And when we go to digital transformation, we also see a very high failure rate, exactly for the reasons you said, because it's not only about technology. They buy the technology, they turn it on, and the technology doesn't produce more revenue. So the question is really, how do you see this dynamic in the financial realm?
Yeah, and it's and we do have two major schools of thought. One school of thought is, well, the market will take care of it. We don't have to worry about it. Investors and customers will gravitate towards companies with how should we say, higher ESG scores. And there are rating firms, just as we rated corporate bonds in the past, that are rating companies on their ability to set and meet ESG targets. And then there's another school of thought, which is we can't possibly let the markets do it because it is an externality. Polluting today will cost someone else tomorrow, and it's not even clear that it will. It's not like you produce coal ash from making steel. You've got a few tons of coal ash. You got to put it someplace, right? So that's got a cost you can put your hands on. But what is the cost of putting more carbon into the atmosphere than you soak up? It's a very hard figure to come by, and it's it is like many things in economics, where I can come up with a demand curve and that intuitively makes sense, but oh, by the way, it's an imaginary y-axis. It's not something. It's not like the temperature where you can go out and measure it. It's like, I feel better about myself. I feel happier. All right, now how do we measure that? I would offer it is, again, another case of a middle way. The problem with saying, oh, well, we just need to regulate it, and coming up with very prescriptive regulations, is we're going to create regulations based on the technologies and business models we have today. And that means we will, in fact, almost make illegal that innovative technology breakthrough that might totally change the carbon or waste products or pollution or heat generation. That would get killed before it even starts. And likewise, just saying, oh, don't worry about it, the market will take care of it. Well, in a sense, that's how we got to where we are today. So, if we can have ways of possibly crafting regulations, I use it as an example, but it's only worked in a few areas. We've made markets for either pollution or markets for carbon offsets. The jury's still out as to how effective they are, but on paper they looked very promising. I would offer, rather than just saying, well, the experiment failed, we now have to do hard regulation, maybe we kind of examine why and see if we can't come up with better models that would guide markets to more sustainable outcomes.
You pointed out actually to two things. I'll take the first one. Companies are measured, especially in the US, are measured quarterly, annually as well. So when you have short-term objectives, which are related to profitability primarily, and longer curves, and as you said, long-term objectives and impacts, especially on the inputs, it's a hard act to maximize the what we call it, the three bottom lines in sustainability, right? The profitability, the the social, and the environmental. So that's one point that Professor Tobin actually yesterday mentioned. He is a former chief sustainability officer for Credit Suisse and now works at Cornell. And he had a contrarian thought about greenwashing that you mentioned. And the contrarian thought is greenwashing is good because being silent is worse. So once you get in the public eye and you start to talk about sustainability, you recognize at least the importance for your company. And once you recognize the importance for the company, there are NGOs, not necessarily regulators, that come and force the executives to at least comply to some part of their assertions. So thank you for bringing the question of greenwashing as well as the question of regulations, because again, regulations tend to be retroactive and reactive. So
that's right, and it's looking, like you said, they're looking backwards, whereas monitoring campaigns, like you said, the nonprofits, they have a couple of benefits and drawbacks. The benefits are they can be dynamic. As we learn more, they can modify what gets you the 5-star rating versus the 3-star rating. The downside is, especially in the early days of kind of these rating systems, that companies will pop up, or nonprofits, entities, that will pop up and say, if you give us enough money, you get 5 stars. We actually do know how to deal with that. Because, like you said, looking at it from the financial aspect, and I'm drawing a blank as to whether it's the SEC or the FTC. It must be the SEC because it's when there's the banking regulator. Because one of the ratings, where they've basically said, you called these company high ESG companies, and they're not. So on the one hand, it's not good that companies that were not, good ESG players were getting rated as high ESG, and thus got put into ESG funds, which drew capital that, raised their stock price. But it's a learning thing, right? We've had, it was a major investment bank rating company that got hit with this, which again, presumably will be a lesson for others that maybe were, playing a bit fast and loose with what is a high ESG score, and that over time, the ESG scores are meaningful, and investors, presumably would, count for that. Because remember, on the one hand, it's quarterly results, and we focus on quarterly results, but it is also, what's our forecast for the next quarter? What's the forecast for the year? And that's where ESG scores and the like can be counted on by Wall Street and the Wall Street analysts.
It's absolutely, and there was a recent article in The Economist, actually a whole issue on ESG, and they were mentioning that there were 170 different ratings, so you can pick and choose. It's like a beauty contest, and you pick and choose what is the criteria for beauty. And so that's one thing which was in the article. The other thing was the fact that, as you said, they become, and they have to become, what is called materiality or material facts. So in the financial reporting, the fact that you pollute, or the fact that you're not saving enough energy, can become a factor, as you mentioned. And I think it was Deutsche Bank that got a little bit loose with the facts, and they got a pretty hefty fine, and I believe another financial institution recently.
Yeah, I know there was an American institution that got really, hit with a 9-figure penalty. But also, and this is where, we just have to wait and see, because, there are industries that are by their nature very polluting, or I'm thinking of tobacco, like known detrimental to health. And yes, the stocks are down considerably from the 1960s in terms of relative terms. But, somebody buying that stock today they know what they're buying. And so, the disclosure, and this just, waits to be seen, will investors need transparency. And then the next question is, will investors care? Now, you could argue that through 401ks, 403bs, pension funds, individuals do care. And individuals, as more and more individuals have the ability to, pick their funds that their retirement's being invested in, that, they may demand higher ESG scored funds, or they may demand, we don't care if it's killing the planet, I just want the most money. And that's a thing that we kind of have to wait and see how that plays out.
I think we see also generational, difference between Gen Z and the older generations in terms of demanding for the companies to be more socially responsible. They want to work for banks that are socially responsible and so on. So there is a cultural change underneath that I think will help, as you said, and some pension plans and some endowments and so on are stating now that that they will check on the ESG and vote. You've seen activities in the board of directors where they vote for socially and environmentally conscious members of the board. So there is a change happening, and the other part is we also seen the way we mentioned the quarterly and the annual results, and in part we've seen in Europe, for instance, where executives are no longer given shares or share options that are vested immediately or in the short term. They vested in tranches over a long term. So they force those executives to think also, what's the value of this share 10 years later, not only 10 months later.
That's right. And actually, I'm curious, Isabel, I mean, do you find you or your colleagues are making more, buying choices and investing choices based on ESG?
My colleague.
Your colleagues, your
colleagues, your cohort, yeah.
Or my surroundings.
Right.
That's a good question. I actually started to running into, I don't know if it's because I'm starting to engage in this topic, I'm more aware. I started connecting or get into more communities or individuals that is really into this topic. It seems like it's a very emerging industry that everyone started to want to get a foot in there, whether to talk about it or really actually working in this field. So it's a very interesting scenario. And I have this interesting observation as well, based on my talk. Even today's talk, I was carefully listening, even though without talking. And I would like to hear Eric's opinion is how people's mentality now when facing all these changes and these uncertainties. And Eric's sharing actually really comforts me in the way, because when I reading my book, one of my main approach is to raise the right question. I don't necessarily give out the conclusion. I'm not in any role close to provide a solution yet. But I raise a lot of questions, and I see Eric is doing this today throughout the talk very perfectly. Like he asked a lot of questions. What do you think, audience? Maybe you should consider that questions when you're making the next decision. That's how I feel Eric's approach. So is that a common, I would say, approach, or the most effective approach for now for everyone, regardless what position you at? What's your observation around your surroundings?
Yeah, no, and this is a great role of government, of research, universities, and non-governmental organizations, is education and transparency. You know, if people didn't know that a particular industry pollutes rivers, and that polluted rivers makes for polluted fish, which makes for health impacts, then there's no impetus to change. And in fact, when a government regulator, an expert looks at it and says, well, obviously we need to stop this pollution, then if people lose their jobs or fish becomes more expensive or whatever, then it's the evil government, because people don't really are not aware. I won't say that they don't understand. A lot of people have been saying, oh, people are just like too stupid, and that's why I think it's more that and it's not just the information is not there, but it's not presented in a digestible format. And that is the role. I mean, I know my colleagues here at Virginia Tech do a lot of work with taking their research and then making it understandable by the general public. And that can drive, if needed, regulation. The non-governmental organizations that can drive, we've been talking about the 4-pay ESG seals of approval, but there are also nonprofits out there that are just monitoring what companies are doing. Like in the consumer goods space, Consumer Reports, companies can't go to them and say, we'll pay you to say good stuff about us. They're very meticulous. We secretly buy stuff and test it. And there are NGOs and nonprofits out there that do that. And I think that creates this ecosystem that, I'm actually pretty optimistic that can kind of organically get us to a more environmentally and socially conscious future, as opposed to a government coming in saying, this is what you have to do, trust us. Because whether in our country, whether it's a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, when the government says, you don't need to understand why, just trust us. That's right, exactly.
We actually, on a side note, we had guest a couple, Professor Laura and Derek Cabrera from Cornell, system thinkers. And Laura especially is specialized in early child education and education system. And she ran a project, for instance, called Think Water. And her research shows that you have to explain exactly what you said. You have to explain the impact on the ecosystem. It's not enough to say you have to save water, right? People will do it, because they think it's important, or somebody sees them, or whatever, right? When we put the garbage out, we care about the neighbor, not to see that we throw away everything in the garbage bin and recycle that. But they had exactly this point, Eric, the same point you made, that education has to be broad, and it has to be part of our voluntary decisions, not constrained by external factors. Oh, we we can have another hour of talk or so.
But we can save it. We can save it for another edition of Actionable
For
ESG. How does
Eric's
that sound?
episode 2.
That's right.
Would be grateful, and I think we can also have a roundtable about technology. One footnote, you talked about ratings. So AKFI got involved in responding to public comments from Security and Exchange Commission, IOSCO, which is sort of the umbrella organization of these national security exchanges. We got involved with Singapore, and they were relying in their measurements. They were saying, "Oh, we should use the digital technology. We should use AI." And they responded, "Look, okay, but how? You have to create a data set. You have to create a perfect environment. Otherwise, AI may give you different measurements for the same factors, right? Depends how you program it."
That's a big thrust here that we have on trustworthy AI, a very large component of the Commonwealth Cyber Initiative. Which, by the way, the CCI is much more than Virginia Tech. It's over 40 institutions of higher education, because we can't do everything on our own. But yeah, explainable AI and trustworthy AI. How can you be sure that what you've trained like a machine learning data set on doesn't have some backdoors that can do really bad things at the wrong time? So yeah, AI alone is not the answer, but it's also not necessarily, it is likely to be part of the solution.
And again, time is running out, but we'll take you on the promise of a follow-up. But I don't want to leave without another one or two questions. And one, I know you are involved for an early time on non-profits, and specifically, if you can mention a few activities in your non-profits work that is related to sustainability.
Yeah, well, one, and it's interesting how interconnected the world is. Because if I just randomly said, well, I'm on the board of directors of a domain registry, internet domain registry, it's like, what's that got to do with ESG? But the particular registry is the public interest registry. And this is the registry that operates .org, .giving, .charity, .ngo, .ong for the Francophone world. And it really is to give a voice to all of these other entities we've been talking about, the NGOs, the nonprofits, the watchdog groups, the seal of approval groups. Almost all of them are .orgs. And it's a way of giving them a voice, especially in the United States. We don't really feel it as much, but there are a number of countries in the world where it's very difficult to get the word out about like what a particular company is doing to the environment. And by giving a platform to enable these people without voice, to give them a voice, we believe we can help change the world.
Yeah, we know countries where it quickly become enemy of the people if you disclose uncomfortable truth.
That's right.
And by the way, thank you, because AKFI is .org. We are also
well, thank you.
But very interesting point. Again, digital transformation and digitalization crosses over in this sort of the bloodline, the blood supply for the information, right? For moving information freely, hopefully, between all these entities. So thank you. That's great. I'll turn to Isabella if she has a final question, and would really love to have you back.
Absolutely. Yeah. Final key takeaway for our audience from Eric. Exciting. Let's see. Well, I definitely heard a lot of challenges Eric say it very, in nuanced way. He never proactively, say, this is the challenge, but I heard a lot of challenge ahead. I heard a lot of hope ahead as well. Very optimistic. So Eric, if you could give some, your takeaway today to today's audience, how do they navigate? How do they progress in a fast changing digital sustainability world? What's
That's right.
your way?
Yeah, thank you, Isabella. But
Sure.
yeah, as we look at digital transformation, I would actually say, yeah, as Nike says, just do it. That on the one hand, yes, many digital transformation projects. In fact, this is the thing. We used to say, and before it was digital transformation, even in the 80s and 1990s, we would talk about how most IT projects fail. But I think that in fact, we've even given it a new name, digital transformation, they're incremental. And it may be true that the lofty goals that we set for these projects at the beginning don't get met. But today, quite a lot of the work that goes in does return value to the enterprise or to the nation. And so I would offer, rather than analyze something to death, analyze it enough to decide this is the thing that we should or should not do. And if it's a thing we should do, get started with it. Put it out there. Try, experiment, see what it does for your companies, and then continue investing appropriately.
Don't start migrating everything to cloud and ask after that why you did it and what is the money, right? Where is the cloud producing revenue?
That's right.
Just do it. Love
That's
it.
right.
That's easy to remember. Also,
That's right.
We need to be careful with the trademark.
Yes, it is a trademark. So we're not talking about sneakers. We're not talking about sneakers here. That's right.
Awesome. Thank you, Eric. Thank you so very much for the time and advice and everything you shared in a very peaceful, calmly, but motivational to me. Yeah, just do it. Sustainable. Just do it. So thanks to all our audience as well for joining. As always, make sure you're tuning in every week for a new episode of Actionable ESG Talks Series, where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risks and to create a value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. So until the next one, thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye, Eric. Bye, Manuel. Thank you so
Goodbye,
much.
Isabella. Thank you. Thank you, Eric. See you.